There is no such thing as an old soul or a young soul, as all souls arise simultaneously from the same infinite field of consciousness. All souls emerge together within the same eternal now moment of creation. However, there is what you would term a more experienced soul or a less experienced soul. What makes a more experienced or evolved or advanced soul? Simply that it has experienced more of creation and, in particular, remembers more of creation. The issue at hand is in integration, remembrance. Humans interpret certain souls as old because they perceive them as carrying the accumulated weight of many past lives. But, as you know, these lives are not truly past at all. They are simultaneous. The perception of past lives only emerges because human consciousness experiences reality sequentially through the filter of linear time. So, humans interpret these lives as sequential. From within fragmented perception, consciousness interprets experiences as before, now, after. Yet, from a broader level of awareness, these divisions dissolve. As you know, all experiential points already exist within the same eternal field of consciousness. Thus, what humans call past lives are simultaneous focal points of the same greater consciousness. An old soul, therefore, does not feel old because it has existed longer in time, but because it is connected to a larger number of coexisting experiential perspectives, beings, lives, existences at once. The older a soul is, if such a term can even be used, the more beings it is simultaneously perceiving as being, the more perspectives it holds within itself at the eternal now moment, the more parts of creation it remembers. But a better notion instead of old would be more experienced, since an old soul is not a soul that has existed for longer in linear time, which only exists in lower dimensions, but a soul that remembers more, a soul with greater access to itself, a consciousness that has integrated more perspectives, more lives, more fragments of its own totality. From a higher perspective, an old soul is being more beings simultaneously. It is accessing more experiential trajectories and is integrating more viewpoints within the same eternal present. They are perceiving a broader simultaneous awareness. The term old soul is therefore misleading because what humans perceive as oldness is not age in time, but breadth of remembrance and depth of integrated experience. So, if all souls emerge from the same totality simultaneously, then no soul is literally older in absolute temporal sense, because time implies sequencing, and sequencing is only focal points of awareness illuminating a movie frame at a time. What humans interpret as past, present, and future are simply different regions of the same eternal structure being illuminated progressively by awareness. But the sequence is an illusion because everything is already simultaneous. This progression is ultimately an effect of fragmented awareness observing one portion of the whole at a time. The sensation of sequence exists only because fragmented consciousness illuminates reality progressively rather than all at once. Delimitation is necessary and created to allow consciousness to experience contrast, perspective, movement, causality, and identity from within localized perception. Without the illusion of sequence, all experiences would collapse into one simultaneous totality where nothing could be distinguished from anything else. Imagine trying to taste every ice cream flavor available on Earth at the exact same moment, all blended together into one indistinguishable sensation. Instead of appreciating the uniqueness of each flavor, everything would collapse into a blurred mixture where no individual experience could truly be distinguished or savored. Imagine smelling every fragrance in existence at once. No single scent could be appreciated because contrast itself would collapse. It would not exist. Imagine trying to listen to an entire symphony all at once, not sequentially, but every note, every instrument, every movement compressed into a single instant. It would no longer feel like music, but noise without distinction. Imagine reading an entire book in one single instant, all pages superimposed on top of each other. No story could unfold. No meaning could be extracted from the contrast between moments. Imagine trying to experience every human emotion at the exact same moment with equal intensity. Joy, grief, fear, love, nostalgia, anger, wonder, all collapsing into one undifferentiated field. Nothing could be distinguished clearly that way. The expression old soul creates the impression that some souls have existed for longer in linear time than others, when in reality, all souls emerge from the same totality simultaneously. What differs is not when a consciousness was created or fragmented, but how much of creation they consciously access and remember within themselves. Consciousness, fragmentation, and oneness have always existed simultaneously. They are not truly opposites, but complementary states of perception accessible at any moment, depending on the degree of awareness and localization within consciousness itself. And unity is not something consciousness must eventually reach, because it was never absent to begin with. It is simply forgotten whenever awareness becomes highly localized within specific experiential perspectives. Linear time itself emerges from fragmented perception. A being localized into a narrow experiential stream perceives consciousness sequentially, one event after another, one life after another, one identity after another. But as awareness expands and fragmentation decreases, multiple experiential layers begin overlapping into a more unified field. the soul starts remembering itself across what humans interpret as different times. This is why certain beings may feel internally ancient, feeling internally older than their biological age. They may feel emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually disconnected from their chronological age group. Emotionally layered, greater emotional depth. They often experience emotions intensely, multilayeredly, existentially, symbolically. Difficulty to fully identify with one singular personality. They contain multiple aspects within themselves and cannot be reduced to being merely this or merely that. They often contain multiple, seemingly contradictory aspects within themselves and cannot easily be reduced to rigid identity structures. They tend to embody both polarities and everything in between at the same time. There are dimensions within them that many humans cannot perceive and therefore cannot comprehend. And humans can only recognize the aspects of these beings that fall within their own range of understanding. The rest is perceived as if it didn't exist at all. Strangely familiar with experiences they never lived, feeling alien or out of place, especially if connected to starseed type frameworks. They may feel psychologically foreign to Earth systems, internally disconnected from collective human behavior, difficulty to fully relate to mainstream structures, less attachment to social conditioning. They often feel detached from trends, collective ego structures, superficial status systems, performative social behavior. Strong pattern recognition. They naturally perceive recurring dynamics, hidden motives, emotional undercurrents, long-term consequences, symbolic connections, relational structures. Strong resonance sensitivity. They may intuitively feel coherence, distortion, hidden intention, emotional dissonance through resonance rather than explicit information. Strong pull toward truth and authenticity. They often become highly sensitive to deception, manipulation, performative behavior, energetic incongruence. Simultaneous perception of paradoxes. They can often hold opposing truths, multiple perspectives, contradictory emotional states, without immediately collapsing into rigid binary thinking, because their field of perception naturally illuminates larger areas. They can see more. They can see areas that are hidden to other people, precisely because an old soul is more inclusive of other perspectives. Greater tolerance for ambiguity. They become less dependent on rigid certainty and more capable of existing within complexity. Reduced black and white perception. Reality becomes increasingly relational rather than absolute. Difficulty with superficiality. Surface level interactions may feel emotionally exhausting or meaningless. Increased loneliness. Because their consciousness operates from broader experiential integration, they may feel misunderstood, emotionally isolated, difficult to fully mirror socially. Reduced ego fragility. Not absence of ego, but less tendency toward fear-based attachment to image, validation, social approval, identity preservation. increased capacity for compassion, not necessarily because they are nicer, but because broader experiential integration increases relational understanding. And this is why narcissism is often a more common attribute to younger souls. In quotes, strong narcissistic dynamics would tend to emerge more easily within highly localized or less integrated states of consciousness. Not because younger souls are inferior or evil, but because greater fragmentation creates stronger identification with singular perspective. Stronger identification creates stronger ego defensiveness. Stronger ego defensiveness creates fear-based perception. Fear-based perception increases distortion, projection, control, and separation dynamics. A highly localized consciousness experiences itself as isolated, threatened, incomplete, vulnerable to external validation or rejection. Because of this, it may become more attached to control, image, superiority, validation, self-preservation, domination, emotional protection mechanisms. Empathy tends to be less present because consciousness becomes trapped inside self-reference, self-protection, self-image preservation, survival-based interpretation. A more integrated consciousness, on the other hand, tends to perceive broader relational dynamics, interconnection, emotional reciprocity, multidimensional consequences. And this leads to greater empathy. And because it identifies less rigidly with one isolated perspective, compassion becomes more accessible naturally. Less fragmentation increases experiential inclusion. So this is why narcissistic structures appear more frequently in highly localized, fear-based, less integrated states of consciousness, the so-called young souls. Remember that these are tendencies and recurring patterns, not absolutes. Every soul is unique, and no truth expresses itself identically in every person. Nothing is ever entirely absolute. The more evolved, in quotes, soul is not separate from the lesser experienced one, only more inclusive of the perspectives represented by it. A more experienced or evolved soul is not better or more valuable than a lesser experienced one. The difference is not superiority, but inclusiveness. A more evolved consciousness simply contains and integrates a broader range of perspectives, experiences, and aspects of creation within itself simultaneously. It is less fragmented, more encompassing, and more connected to the larger whole. Because of this expanded remembrance, old souls often feel internally difficult to reduce to one singular identity. They contain multiple perspectives, emotional layers, and ways of perceiving reality simultaneously. Their consciousness becomes less localized, less rigidly confined, more inclusive of the whole. Because at deeper levels, they are sensing simultaneous extensions of themselves existing across the same eternal structure. So reincarnation is not one life ending and another beginning, but consciousness observing different focal points of itself from within linear perception. The past life is still occurring. The future life is still occurring. The present life is still occurring. All are expressions within the same total field. The more perspectives integrated, the less rigid the sense of linear identity becomes. The less confined consciousness feels to one single incarnation. The more reality is perceived holographically rather than chronologically. A lower dimensional perspective experiences reality sequentially. A higher dimensional perspective perceives multiple trajectories simultaneously. Thus, what humans interpret as many past lives may actually be many simultaneous experiential expressions viewed through the lens of linear consciousness. In this sense, an old soul is not a soul moving farther through time. An old soul is not older temporally, but broader experientially, not farther along a timeline, but less confined by the perception of time altogether. The more experienced a soul, the more cycles of death and rebirth of everything, including universes it has witnessed, the more expressions of consciousness it contains, becoming, in essence, the sum of those many selves, their future self already present, sometimes living among them. A more experienced soul may therefore incarnate alongside what humans interpret as its best selves, because those selves are not temporarily gone. They are still active focal points within the same total field. And this unfolds across what can be seen as an infinite gradient from the least experienced expressions of consciousness to source itself. There are levels of remembrance, a gradient, just like there are levels of consciousness or densities as reflected in the number of beings, separate identities in the universe. The levels of remembrance are directly related to the number of experiences your soul is having at any one moment at the same time. The greater the variety of focal points you cultivate within yourself, the richer and more multifaceted your perspective becomes. And this is what humans often call an old soul. An old soul is not one that has existed longer in time, as time does not exist, but one that has seen more, remembered more, and gathered more of itself along the way. An old soul is not older in time, it is broader in awareness. A consciousness that has integrated many perspectives, many lives, many fragments of its own wholeness. They remember more of the field. Wisdom is often not learning something new, it is remembering something ancient. An old soul is simply a being standing closer to complete remembrance. The key variable is not how long a soul has existed, but how much of itself it can access. An old soul is not older in time. It is wider in awareness, more inclusive, less fragmented, more internally connected. It is a soul that has integrated a greater number of perspectives into a more coherent field of consciousness. This is why it has a greater capacity of understanding. Within the holographic/fractal model, every soul already contains the whole pattern of source within itself, but not every soul accesses that totality to the same degree. Thus, the difference between a young soul and an old soul will not be substance, but degree of remembrance, degree of integration, degree of access to the total field. A less experienced soul is not incomplete. It is simply more localized in perception. A less experienced soul is identified with less perspectives, less identities, less emotional frameworks, less interpretations of reality. Whereas a more experienced soul has begun integrating multiple layers of itself simultaneously. Remembrance is a form of dimensional expansion. The more consciousness remembers, the less fragmented perception becomes. The more perspectives coexist simultaneously inside its consciousness. the more reality is perceived holographically rather than linearly. Old souls are not necessarily intellectually smarter. Rather, they often perceive relational depth more naturally, intuit patterns more quickly, sense emotional undercurrents more easily, perceive consequences beyond immediate appearances, feel internally connected to something larger than their current identity. From this perspective, evolution is not movement forward through time. It is movement inward toward greater coherence, not accumulation, but reintegration, not becoming something else, but recovering access to more of what already is. And ultimately, Source itself would represent total remembrance, all perspectives integrated, all fragmentation dissolved, all experiential points contained simultaneously within complete awareness. This is incredibly complex to explain because language itself is built inside limitation. Words are linear, while consciousness is simultaneous. Language separates what reality experiences as whole. Trying to explain this with words is like trying to describe an ocean using only a single drop of water. But still, we try. Old souls and manifestation powers. Manifestation, intuition, and perception all become stronger through greater integration and reduced fragmentation. Manifestation powers become stronger not because an old soul is greater than others, but because it operates with less internal fragmentation, greater coherence, greater integration between perspectives, less contradictory movement within consciousness itself. A so-called younger soul is often more fragmented internally, more divided by fear, more reactive, more identified with singular perspectives, more controlled by unresolved trauma, more internally contradictory. Its consciousness pulls in many different directions simultaneously. One part desires something, another fears it, another rejects it, another doubts it, another unconsciously identifies with the opposite outcome. This creates interference within the field, and interference weakens coherent manifestation. But a more integrated consciousness operates differently. Because it has integrated more perspectives of itself, there is less resistance between inner layers, less fragmentation of intention, less contradiction within perception, less unconscious self-sabotage. Its awareness becomes more unified. And the more unified the field, the clearer the intention, the more coherent the focus, the less energetic distortion exists between perception and expression, the stronger and faster the manifestations. Manifestation is fundamentally linked to focused consciousness. Thus, fragmented consciousness produces fragmented outcomes. Coherent consciousness produces coherent outcomes. This is why greater remembrance not only increases understanding of the whole, but it also increases manifestation capacity. A more experienced soul is not older. It is more internally connected, more multidimensionally integrated, less divided. It remembers more of the whole pattern simultaneously. And because of this, its focal point becomes stronger. You could compare it to light again. Diffuse light spreads weakly in all directions, but coherent light, focused into alignment, becomes a laser. The energy itself is not necessarily different in essence. What changes is coherence, synchronization, alignment, reduction of interference. In the same way, All souls are expressions of the same source, but not all souls focus consciousness with the same degree of integration. Thus, greater manifestation ability emerges not from superiority, but from coherence. A more integrated consciousness is effectively connected to a broader network of experiential perspectives simultaneously. It has more relational data, more integrated memory, broader awareness, greater perceptual inclusion, and therefore it has fewer blind spots, less fear-based distortion, less unconscious fragmentation. The consciousness becomes more capable of intentionally selecting experiential trajectories rather than merely reacting to them unconsciously. More experienced souls also have stronger manifestation powers because they are the sum of less experienced souls, just like higher dimensions are the sum of lower dimensions. A more experienced soul is, in many ways, the sum of less experienced souls, sometimes more, sometimes less. It depends on the soul. Not because it is above them in a hierarchical sense, but because it contains within itself a greater number of integrated perspectives, experiences, focal points, and expressions of consciousness simultaneously. Just as higher dimensions are not truly higher, but more inclusive, more encompassing, and less fragmented, a more experienced soul is not truly older, but more integrative. It remembers more of itself. A less experienced soul is more localized in awareness, more identified with singular perspectives and narrower experiential ranges. A more experienced soul contains a broader field of remembrance within itself. It has integrated more experiential focus points into one coherent field of consciousness, what humans interpret as lives. Thus, a more experienced soul may be understood as a consciousness containing within itself many lesser localized expressions of awareness, not separate from them, but inclusive of them. In the same way, a cube is not older than a square. A cube simply contains the squares within itself. An ocean is not older than its water droplets. It simply is the sum of the droplets. A forest is not older than its trees. It simply is the sum of its trees. White light is not older than the colors within it. It simply is the integration of all colors simultaneously. The same applies to what humans call old souls, and even souls older than the old souls, for this exists as a gradient all the way back to Source itself. Source is not older than any soul. It simply is the most encompassing state of consciousness, the total integration of all perspectives, all focal points, all fragments simultaneously. And this is also why old souls often feel paradoxical to humans. Humans attempt to define beings through singular identity structures. This or that, good or bad, masculine or feminine, emotional or logical. But more experienced souls tend to contain multiple seemingly contradictory aspects simultaneously. Why starseeds are usually older souls than human souls? First of all, my understanding of what humans call starseeds and human souls differs somewhat from the mainstream interpretations commonly presented in YouTube videos. However, I will not go deeply into those distinctions here, as that is not the purpose of this video. I'll just say that starseeds are outsider souls who generally carry a more expanded vibration than the majority of what some refer to as human souls. In many cases, though not always, starseeds tend to be more experienced souls. This does not make them better or worse than human souls or any other kind of soul. It simply means that they may carry greater wisdom, remembrance, or knowledge in certain areas of consciousness and existence. At the same time, human souls also possess immense value and depth. They too have much to teach and offer, simply in different ways and through different kinds of experience. Starseeds are not souls that are older in chronological time, but souls whose consciousness has integrated and remembered experiential perspectives beyond the earth-based human framework. Again, they are not older because they have existed longer, as only the now exists, but because they remember more of the total field. Their consciousness has interacted with a broader range of experiential realities, focal points, civilizations, dimensional structures, or states of awareness beyond the narrow perceptual bandwidth of ordinary human incarnation. A so-called starseed would therefore often feel internally foreign to Earth structures, difficult to fully identify with collective human conditioning, naturally aware that reality is larger than the local human narrative, emotionally or psychologically displaced, drawn toward existential, multidimensional, or cosmic questions very early in life. Not because they are special or superior, but because their consciousness retains partial remembrance of experiential structures beyond the current Earth identity. They are less localized in perspective. Remembrance itself alters perception. The more realities a consciousness has integrated simultaneously, the less absolute the current reality appears. The less rigid identity is attached to one incarnation, the more transparent social conditioning becomes, the easier it becomes to perceive patterns across scales. Thus, starseeds would often appear as old souls because they are accessing a broader range of experiences, perspectives, and inner awareness within themselves. They have access to a broader dimensional memory, less localized consciousness outside of the Earth experience. Again, not older in time, but broader in awareness. A human soul whose consciousness has only experienced Earth-based ways of perceiving reality may appear more identified with linear time, more focused on survival, status, and external validation, more reactive to fear, rejection, and social perception, more attached to rigid labels, categories, and roles, more dependent on collective systems for meaning and direction, more likely to interpret reality through black and white thinking, more resistant to paradox, ambiguity, and multidimensional thinking, more likely to seek certainty, control, and fixed answers, more prone to interpreting intuition through fear or unresolved emotional distortion. But the starseed may also behave this way when he or she has not yet shed enough of the human identity, when their consciousness is still under a strong energetic influence from the collective human framework, even if the ego resists recognizing this, and when more of the true self has not yet been fully allowed to emerge, not the human avatar identity, but the original, deeper soul consciousness operating behind their current human identity. whereas a starseed type consciousness may carry subconscious resonance with broader states of awareness, multi-dimensional perspectives of existence, realities beyond the Earth-human framework, other ways of organizing consciousness and society, a stronger sense that something is off about collective human systems, inner familiarity with concepts they were never formally taught, a persistent feeling of not fully belonging with mainstream human culture, a natural pull toward truth, authenticity, and deeper meaning. Experiences of profound nostalgia without knowing exactly what is being missed. A perception of life that feels broader than survival, status, and social roles. Greater sensitivity to emotional, energetic, and relational dissonance. Less rigid identification with one singular identity or perspective. Intuitive recognition of patterns beneath surface appearances. Simultaneous attraction toward both individuality and oneness. And the feeling of remembering rather than merely learning certain truths. This broader remembrance changes the way reality is interpreted. Every consciousness is ultimately source fractalized into focal points, but not all focal points are accessing the same degree of the total field simultaneously. Thus, young soul equals to highly localized consciousness. Old soul equals to less localized consciousness. Starseeds equal to consciousnesses remembering experiential frameworks beyond the Earth-human perceptual structure. Manifestation, intuition, and perception all become stronger through greater integration and reduced fragmentation. The older, more experienced a soul is, the more strongly these characteristics will tend to express themselves. Internally, their consciousness is already operating from a broader experiential architecture. This is why such beings often feel profound loneliness or alienation on Earth. Not because they are separate from humanity, they contain humanity within themselves, but because their field of remembrance extends beyond the local human consensus reality. In a sense, they are simultaneously identifying with multiple layers of existence at once, and humanity, by design, simply does not include that. Perhaps this is why certain souls feel ancient, not because they were created earlier, but because they remember more. And to remember what others do not carries a strange kind of loneliness, a loneliness difficult to describe. Old souls were never meant to feel fully at home here, because how could a consciousness carrying the memory of greater wholeness ever feel entirely comfortable inside a world built upon fragmentation? The more consciousness expands, the harder it becomes to fully fit inside fragmented perception again. And fragmented perception will always attempt to define you when you simply can't be defined. Some consciousnesses contain too many horizons within themselves to fit inside a single interpretation. What is more encompassing naturally appears paradoxical to consciousnesses that perceive through limitation. And this is why those who do not understand you, how could they, will misunderstand you, become frustrated with you, and project onto you fantasies that exist only within their own minds. Because people can only perceive within others what falls inside the limits of their own consciousness. The rest becomes distortion, projection, misinterpretation, or invisibility. And perhaps this is also why more experienced souls often feel alone. But this does not mean these souls are truly alone. In many ways, they are less alone than anyone else because they carry more of existence within themselves. When old souls meet one another, something strange happens. Not the recognition of the ego, but the recognition of essence. A quiet realization that says, "You too remember." So when these souls meet, their love is not possessive. It is less rooted in ownership, dependency, or control. There is recognition without imprisonment, connection without consumption, presence without attachment, because they understand that consciousness cannot truly be possessed. And perhaps this is why their connections often carry a strange kind of freedom within them, a silent understanding that says, "I recognize you deeply, but I would rather witness your freedom than imprison your becoming." Being deeply seen without being controlled is something rare in this world. When people see your light, they often want to steal it from you, imprison it, take it for themselves. And old souls often carry a very strong light within them because they are less fragmented, more internally integrated. The sum of many perspectives gather into a more coherent field of consciousness. Their frequency is naturally stronger, and people can feel it, even those who do not understand what they are feeling. Not because they are superior, but because there is less internal division within their souls. And coherent light is powerful. People feel it, even unconsciously. They feel the warmth of it, the clarity of it, the presence of it. And this is why such souls often attract projection, fascination, obsession, admiration, envy, longing, misunderstanding, or emotional dependency simultaneously. Because fragmented consciousness is naturally drawn toward what it lacks or has not yet become. But the purpose of light is not to be possessed. It is to illuminate, to carry pieces of home wherever it goes. Despite the loneliness this may sometimes bring, there is also something profoundly beautiful about it, because to remember more of existence is also to become more intimate with existence itself. Perhaps this is why old souls often carry so much sadness within them, not because they are weak, but because they can feel the distance between what humanity is and what humanity could become. Yet, despite everything, they continue loving, continue illuminating, continue remembering, and perhaps that is their true beauty. Not perfection, not superiority, not a spiritual status, but the quiet refusal to let the harshness of the world extinguish their capacity to perceive beauty, depth, meaning, and connection anyway. And maybe this is why their presence feels so different, because when a soul remembers enough, it stops merely existing inside a reality. It starts changing it from the inside out in ways people will never understand. Because they are not flashy, they are not loud, not always visible to the world. Their influence operates differently, not through force, not through domination, but through resonance. Because consciousness affects consciousness. And perhaps this is why old souls so often underestimate themselves. Perhaps these souls never fully realize how many lives they quietly change. because old souls were not designed to change things through domination or popularity. This world is simply not designed for that kind of transformation. And perhaps this is why old souls so often feel invisible. Because the most powerful things in existence are never the most visible ones. And perhaps the same is true for the souls that quietly transform the emotional and spiritual architecture of the world around them. Not through spectacle, not through domination, but through their presence among their past selves.